Rajesh ji, and welcome our Vice Chancellor, and most importantly, welcome Professor Mahadevan. Very briefly, we have an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. Just a couple of lines about him. Professor Mahadevan is an alumnus of IIT Madras, and he is a professor at IIT Bangalore. He teaches operations management, and he has also been the Vice Chancellor of Chinmaya Vishwavidyalaya. But most importantly for today's topic, he uses ancient Indian sources, scriptural texts to understand how to operate life and, of course, the business. And now I will request my Vice Chancellor to say a few words before Professor Mahadevan takes over the platform.
Right. Professor Mahadevan, it gives me immense pleasure to invite you to this webinar. Thanks to COVID-19, when we have started moving on to the online platforms, it has become so easy to get connected with each one of us across the country, in fact, across the globe. Having said that, I noticed that there are more than 200 participants from across India. All those participants who are on this platform, I request you to please recollect if you attended any dance program maybe a few months ago, or maybe during last 1 year. Let's say you attended a Bharatanatyam program, and please recollect your experiences when you were watching the Bharatanatyam performance on the stage. Perhaps there was a single dancer, maybe there were other dancers who are accompanying this dancer with musicians playing the music. Now, usually in a Bharatanatyam or in other forms of dance, the dancer tells a story or a spiritual message, maybe from Ramayana or Bhagavatam or Puranas, through a song and a range of movements which display emotions, form, range, pattern, and so on. But what is interesting is that the performance aims to engage all your senses. Now, when you are watching such a Bharatanatyam or other dance on the stage, can you recollect if you ever worried about a bad experience you had with your friend few days ago? Have you ever worried about something that may happen or may not happen in future? I'm sure if you recollect your experiences during that half an hour or 1 hour, you are completely focused on absorbing what the dancer is trying to convey by observing the dynamic motions of the dancer. In other words, during that period, you are living in the present. You are not thinking about what experiences you went through or what things may happen in the future. You are focused on the present. That is what yoga tells us. Often we mistake yoga to yogasanas, those complicated yoga postures, but that is only one part of yoga. Yogacharya Patanjali has beautifully described yoga as chitta vritti nirodha. That means chitta means consciousness, vritti, the fluctuations that happen, and nirodha, how to frighten those fluctuations so that we realize our self potential and lead a full life. We look forward to listen to Professor Mahadevan's exposition on yoga, how it will help us in reducing these fluctuations, how it will help us in reducing stress and burnout so that we can lead our lives as good human beings helping each other. I once again welcome Professor Mahadevan for delivering his lecture.
Thank you, Professor Jagdish Kumar. It was a wonderful opportunity, wonderful preamble to my talk. Let me first of all thank you, JNU, Professor Hiraman Chivari, and all others who have made this possible. I also thank so many participants who are here for this webinar. It's my pleasure to spend the next perhaps 40-45 minutes to sort of talk a little bit about yoga. Professor Jagdish Kumar has put such a nice preamble that relieves me of a few things that I don't have to do. But being a professor of management, let me sort of take yoga into management after an initial exposition of how it can make a difference to all of us. But before I get into the details, very quickly to add to what Professor Jagdish Kumar said, see, the word yoga comes from the Sanskrit root yunj. Yunj is to connect. You know, in engineering terms, there is a word called yoke. Yoke came from the same Sanskrit root only. Yoke means a coupling or a connection. So yoga is a mechanism to connect. The question is, connect us with what? Connect us with the ultimate. Sync ourselves. If I use the word sync, everybody understands. Today we have iPods and OneDrives and so on. So you have to sync. So yoga helps us to sync with the eternal nature, and therefore it's a very fundamental idea that would be very, very useful. So with this quick preamble, let me get on to why do we need yoga and how do we sort of look at this whole beautiful proposition called yoga, which is gaining more and more currency in the whole world now, thanks to some of the initiatives that we have taken in the last 4 or 5 years. Let me first start by the issue of job stress and burnout, because we have to understand certain things which are very real in the way we work. So therefore, we need to first get that before we get into yoga. Now, world over, workers are facing extended work hours. I am told that when we are working from home, this has added a few more hours also. This is what I hear nowadays after COVID and so on. So it's extended work hours, workload, work overload, leading to job burnout and mental stress. This is one area in which there's phenomenal research which has happened from the management side also. Growing number of dissatisfied employees. They are complaining of deprived meaning in their workplace. Human beings are organic entities. If we cannot make meaning, it translates into stress. So this making meaning is very, very important issue in addressing stress. American managers want a deeper sense of meaning, fulfillment on the job, even more than money and time off. Yeah, I think they have all gone through one full cycle. All this going after money and all that has been of late challenged. And there's a lot of noise now, there's a lot of voice now, which says, do workers need just money and growth, finance and growth? No, they say they want some opportunity for spiritual and personal growth as well. Otherwise, there are researchers who are saying we are wasting a lot of our time on two important things. So the point I'm making is there are two issues. One is, what is this satisfaction? Can employers give full satisfaction? Do you look upon the employers for satisfaction, or you have to look inside for satisfaction? This is a question which yoga has answered so well. Our ancestors have answered this question very well, because we have come back to square one. Satisfaction is not going to be by one more promotion, two more incentives, another 500 rupees, this, that, one trip to some place. This is not satisfaction. Yoga perhaps answers some of those. And I think there is a call for opportunity beyond just work. There is something called, every individual has something. So all these are sort of playing out. Now let's look at some surveys which will tell us what's really happening. So if you ask what are the top 10 reasons why people get stressed, this was done in the US. I put 7 here. And very surprisingly, what you will find in these 7 items that are listed here, except item 5, which says poor nutrition, which is physical. All others are actually mental, meaning it has something to do with the mind. Nutrition is something to do with the kind of food we eat, the kind of vitamins and fats and all that. But the rest are all issues pertaining to the mind. So if you look at this, it is very clear that stress is something which has to do with mind. That's what the survey is saying. And there's another survey which says what happens to people when they are stressed out. Now, 77% of the people, they say that experience physical symptoms caused by stress, but there are psychological symptoms. They feel living as though in extreme stress. They feel stress has increased in the last 5 years. Money and work as the cause for their stress, all kinds of things. So again, if you look at the survey, even the physical issues are related to a certain state of mind. So therefore, this whole question now is how do you de-stress yourself? And the only way you can de-stress yourself, or the only way I can de-stress myself, is to address the issue of mind. We cannot push it below the carpet. We cannot leave it as something unknown, and therefore let's not bother about it. Fortunately, this country, I would say the Eastern culture by and large, and particularly the Indian subcontinent, has phenomenal ideas to address this central issue which the world is facing today. We have done enough technology, we have everything on our fingertips, but then we have a mental stress and we want to really address it. We want to address that in the era of COVID. I think this is increasing a little bit more. Therefore, there is no better time than now to really talk about it and try to understand what really happens and what kind of things are possible. So what really happens is burnout basically starts, it is an end result of stress. Why burnout happens? It is the end result of stress. But the stress which is not coped, we need coping mechanisms. You cannot let stress to keep going on and on. That's called burnout. And if you leave it like that, it transforms into symptoms of exhaustion, irritation, ineffectiveness, and all that. And that moves even bigger. One starts discounting oneself and others, problems of health. So all these issues are all rolling one over the other, and all of them trace back to the mental stress. Therefore, whichever way we go, notwithstanding the kind of technology that we have, the kind of advancements that we have, we need all of them. I'm not actually discounting any of those, but we need something along with that. But there was a German philosopher, I suddenly remember a sentence that comes to my mind. Schopenhauer, in 1819, he wrote a book in German, which was translated in 1852 into English. The book is called The World as Will and Representation. I suddenly remember a sentence from this book. He says, now that we have solved all problems of security and welfare, we become problem ourselves. This is what he said. He said, you bring a lot of material richness. He said 200 years back. You bring a lot of material richness, that's not going to solve the problem. The problem is going to shift to a more quintessential nature, which is you become a problem yourself. This is what he said in that book. So essentially, our ancestors understood the centrality of this issue. They understood that mind is the centerpiece of what you are and where you can go and what you can count at the end of the day. Whether you can sleep peacefully every night, whether you can have your last sleep peaceful, is a function of not the bank balance. Of course, they are very important. Don't take me wrong. I'm not telling you don't need money. I'm not at all saying any of those. I'm saying that's only a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition. Mind has to be addressed. Mind has to be squarely addressed, understood, and tamed. So this is where the Indian scriptures come in. This is where Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the entire Yoga Shastra comes in and gives us a certain kind of a perspective. So therefore, it's all about understanding the mind game. If we have lost out this game, we will lose the game of life. You can do whatever you want to do. If you have not understood this mind game, if you have not come to terms with what is called mind, in fact, to put it in a very lighter vein, imagine you have a very complex equipment, extraordinarily a sophisticated equipment, and you don't have an operations manual for it. See, for this small little mobile, I need to know what to do with this. I need to know the sort of how do I open it, what do I do it, if I press it left, what happens, if I press it right. For a small mobile, I need a little bit of operations manual. God has given us a most complex apparatus ever we can think of, called mind. But unfortunately, we did not open the operations manual. Yoga Sutra is one of the wonderful operations manual to read so that we can use the mind. So we are trying to use an equipment without an operations manual. We are finding it by the day. I'm sure it's a very inefficient way of using a wonderful equipment that the nature has given us. Anyway, so mind is an apparatus available with us. And what does it do? The first job of mind is it will keep wandering all the time. This is its preoccupation. Its quintessential nature is to find a way to keep going out all the time, slip out of you. That's why Patanjali said, yoga hai chitta chitta vritti nirodha. This slipping out has to be first controlled. You have to plug it. It keeps wandering all the time. And where does it wander? It revels in the world of dualities. What do you mean by duality? Good, bad, success, failure. Sitosha sukha dukkataha agama paino anityaha tamtitiksha swabharata. Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita. He said this world has a lot of dualities. I like, I don't like, success, failure, positive, negative, good, bad, heat, cold. So this mind revels in these dualities, out of which it gets into controversies, it gets into adversaries, contrasts of existence, comparisons. This is how this equipment is being used. Constantly makes an effort to deal with the gross objects of the world. And essentially, using it in an inefficient way is all about using the mechanism only for the outside world. It's a mechanism for dealing with the outside world, no doubt. But it can also be used for the inside world. Every one of us have a world inside as much as a world outside. But we don't seem to be using the mind. We use the mind for one half of the requirement. The other half of the requirement we don't even know. That's the situation we are in. How does the mind engage in our life? Let us get a little more detail. This mind has this business. What it will do is, it will not accept the reality as it unfolds. Let me tell you, reality unfolds, it doesn't take your permission. It takes nobody's permission. It unfolds by the moment. By a nanosecond, it unfolds. A wise person understands reality will unfold, not waste too much time, except for some Yavahara, one has to do a little bit of calculation and all that. What I'm talking about is not that. I'm talking about something else. We don't accept reality as it unfolds, so the mind starts working now. It seeks to understand why events unfolded one way or the other. It wants to really make sense of why is it happening. Okay, that's one direction. Another direction, it questions about many things, events happening in our life endlessly. And let me tell you, the more and more you question, from a scientific perspective, you may be better off. But in a meta-scientific perspective, the more you question, more you will go mad, actually. You should learn how to actually handle things instead of rattling with a lot of questions. But anyway, that's what the mind does. And judge everyone, everything around us, and start making, conclusions, which may be quite often not right, which may be quite unfounded. The mind does all these. I mean, this is outside of the scientific inquiry. I'm not talking about scientific inquiry. There is a purpose, there is some inquiry. I'm talking about the rattling of the mind on unnecessary things, on events that are happening on which I have no control, dreaming about the future, doing a vilapana about the past. Something that happened in the past, I keep worrying about it all the time. All these are wasteful energies which the mind is very fond of. So it continuously bargains for results with everyone, including the God also. This is one major preoccupation of the mind. An unrefined mind has a tendency to do all these. This is what our yogic literature, our ancestral literature has very vividly talked about. So there is a lot of analytical work for our analytical mind to work, or put it the other way. This analytical mind has a lot of work to find answers, and we will spend a lot of time, we'll get a gray matter, but still we'll keep doing it for wasteful things, not for useful things. For a lot of wasteful things I'm talking about. This is one major preoccupation of the mind. You may be thinking I'm probably telling too much. So let me take you through a quick transcript. You just see this transcript. Well, there is a ring of the bell of the wall clock that reminds me of the temple that I visited today morning. I am reminded of a tall person who mentioned about his daughter who is in Chicago. my memory goes to visit that I made Chicago 14 years ago. Just look at this. I stayed in my brother's friend's house in Chicago. His daughter is Lakshmi. I am now reminded of the next street neighbor of the same name. There's one more Lakshmi coming now. She served us masala dosa when we visited their house last week. Hotel Saravana Bhavan makes good masala dosas. Masala dosa contain onions. Onions are not sattvic food, that is taboo. My mother-in-law does not eat onions. When onion prices went up, Delhi government lost the elections. Price rise is a problem that we face today. My servant maid keeps demanding more and more. I can keep going on. You may be wondering, what is this? Do you know what is this? This is the rattling of a mind in 1 or 2 seconds. Every mind is capable of doing it. It finds adjacency from one event to another event and keeps going. So I have just written what would have happened to me for a second. If I take a piece of paper and write what my mind has thought about in the last 10 hours, I would have cut all the trees in the world and converted them into paper. Still, it is not enough. This is what is called rattling of the mind. This is a transcript of a wandering mind of a normal person for a few seconds, my dear friends. I'm not talking for hours. It quickly jumps from one to the other and so on. You think about a normal person. Think about an agitated person. This is why mind is a very, very important apparatus which we have to handle. And our ancestors have phenomenally thought about it and come up with this idea of yoga and so on. I want to show you this picture. Just look at this picture, a very famous picture. And when people look at it, they tell a lot of things. Oh, this is Parthasarathi. This is a famous picture that you see in Bhagavad Gita and so on. But let me tell you, this picture is very profound. This picture actually conveys a very important principle that we are talking about today. And what does it actually convey? It's available in Kathopanishad. The same story which is available in chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita is available in Kathopanishad. What does it say? Look at here. There is this chariot. Please understand, the chariot cannot even move an inch. It is an inert material. It cannot move. Chariot by itself cannot move. You need a horse or you need a horsepower. Put a motor with 10 horsepower which can drive this chariot. Chariot is inert. Now, the motive power is given only to these horses, correct? Now, these horses have veins. The horses have to be controlled, otherwise the 5 horses will start going in 5 different directions. So need a vein now. Now the vein, mere having vein is not enough. Somebody must hold it. So there must be a charioteer who must hold this, and he or she must sort of, steer it. And only then, person who is sitting in the chariot can actually travel to the destination that he wants to go. That is the profundity of this Parthasarathi imagery. This is available in Kathopanishad. Buddhim tu sarathim viddhi. He says life, this talks about life. Life is a journey. And for this journey, we have a chariot called body. Body has no motive power. If you want to know about it, look at a dead person. Dead person cannot lift his hand, cannot even blink if you show a cup of halwa in front of him. Nothing. It's all the sensory system which really brings. As I talk to you, I can go to Chicago now. My mind can take me to Chicago. So my motive power is available with my indriyas. So the indriyas are the horses. That is, the motive power is in the horses, not in the chariot. The reins, the equivalent of the reins is the manas, the mind that we are talking about. The mind decides what to do with these horses, and the mind should be given in the hands of a buddhi. You should make the mind slave of the buddhi. If you make buddhi slave of the mind, those people have become, they suffer very much in their life. And only if all these happens well, then the adhikari or the king, the Arjuna or you, the soul which is sitting in, will actually go in that journey where they want to go in this life. That is this Parthasarathi imagery. So what is critical here is the reins first, and the reins has to be given in the hands of a charioteer. And that's what yoga actually tells us. How do you get these reins? How do you make that buddhi is the sarathi for this whole life journey that we have? Well, very quickly, I'm not going to get into details of yoga. Yoga is a commonplace knowledge has become. So I'm going to say what is not yoga rather than saying what is yoga. because a lot of people know a little bit of yoga, but they seem to have a certain kind of misconception. So let me only clarify what is not yoga. Yoga is not at all about physical exercise, although it looks very conspicuous. You know, of course, it's not entirely about asanas. Asanas may be one part of yoga. So yoga is, meditation is not about physical exercise. Yoga is not about mats, dresses, then, you know, tiger and deer skin spread. There are a lot of controversies. People are wasting time and all that because it is written in some scriptures written some 20,000 years back and so on. And there's a big industry selling mats and dresses. Yoga is not about all these. They may be useful for you to put a certain uniform and all that, which is fine. Yoga is, and the meditation, yoga is not a skill that can be surgically intervened into you. It cannot be outsourced or intervened into you through some surgical thing. It's not that. And another big misconception people have is morning 6 to 7 o'clock is yoga. It's a compartment. And 7 o'clock to next day morning 6 o'clock, do everything which is ayogic. Do everything which is against yoga. This is like saying, I fast, I am on fast for 6 days, Monday through Saturday, and on Sunday I eat so madly that all the fast gets nullified because I am so hungry. So on Sunday is my day. I go and eat like anything and then nullify all the effect. This is how people use yoga. Yoga is not a compartment. Yoga is a way of life. You can't do power yoga and this yoga and that yoga for half an hour in the morning. And the rest of the day is you do all kinds of things which is antithesis to yoga. Therefore, please understand, and Patanjali did not say that. His sutras are so beautiful, so nicely, you know, sort of coined together. So yoga is an intense preparation and it is a mental exercise. Please understand. The physical exercise is only a preparation for a mental exercise. It's a mental exercise, it's a preparation for samadhi. Manasamadhiyatam. Let the mind settle and settle. We talk so much about mind. Manaha samadhiyatam. That is the idea. Let the mind slowly calm down. You have won over the mind. You will find the new ways of doing things. The power of, you know, doing things in life. That's why Krishna says, yoga ha karmasu kauchalam. Krishna also said, samatvam yoga uchyate. He has given so many definitions. The best treatise for yoga is Bhagavad Gita. That's why every chapter is also ending with the name yoga. So that is what yoga is. It is not about any of these that I have written here. It's a very important tool for managing one's through the journey of progressive mind control. That's what yoga is all about. Now, one can get into Gita, particularly chapter 6, Atma Samyama Yoga. He talks about so many beautiful, it's a beautiful chapter. It's a cookbook. Step by step, one can follow it. Start from Shloka 10 to Shloka 22. Step by step, he will say what to do. Such a beautiful chapter in Bhagavad Gita, Atma Samyama Yoga. He says, you know, on Ekanta Shilata, he talks about what is called Yuktahara Viharasya, Yukta Karmasya Cheshtasu. He says, Yukta Sopna Avabodasya, Yogo Bhavati Dukkaha. Practice moderation in life. Don't overdo things. Don't eat too much. Don't starve too much. Don't sleep too much. Don't wake up too much. He says the path, middle path. Buddha, in a Buddhist system, is called middle path. The moderation is very important to calm the mind. That's why he says, Yukta Karmasya Cheshtasu, Yogo Bhavati Dukkaha. So like that, there are so many things. Some thoughts on seating. He says, where do you focus your mind? He says, Nashikagram Swayam. Look at your, he said Nashikagram. Look at the tip of the nose. Then Krishna also said Swayam, because you will start looking at somebody else's nose. So he says Nashikagram Swayam. Look at the tip of your own nose. That level of detail is available in Bhagavad Gita. It's a beautiful cookbook on how do you actually start your few lessons of Bhagavad Gita, of yoga. How to focus your mind, how to focus the vision as a first step. All those are there. I'm not getting into it. One can possibly read it. So I thought I will just say that there is a beautiful body of knowledge available, very systematically laid out. The Ashtanga Yoga is there. So nicely it sort of tells us how to go step by step. Krishna has so nicely in Bhagavad Gita brought it in such an elaborate fashion. All those are available. So what is this yoga way of life? If you look at the Ashtanga Yoga, what is it saying? The Yama and Niyama. See, there is something called Bahiranga Prayoga and Antaranga Prayoga. The first 5 are called Bahiranga Prayoga. You have to first manage your mind vis-a-vis the external world. Draw it. Once you are able to win over the mind on the external things, then come inside. The last 3, Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi, is called Antaranga Prayoga. Whereas Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama and Pratyahara are called Bahiranga Prayoga. That you first do the gross things. Let's go to the subtle a little later. So Yama and Niyama, what does it do? It actually shapes our external behavior and thought patterns and minimizes disturbances in the mind. Patanjali has given so beautiful steps. Satyam, Asteya, Parigraha. You have to very diligently follow it and do small little experiments in our life. We will win over that. It's not about reading. It's about actually practicing. One step at a time. It's a baby step that we need to take. He has given steps for Yama and Niyama. Then comes Asana. People jump straight to Asana. Please do Yama and Niyama. Have it along with Asana and Pranayama. Asana and Pranayama is for disciplining the body, bring a rhythm into it, regulate the energy flow. So beautifully, students, many of my students, very elderly students, my regular students come to me and ask me, sir, what should I do? There's so much of vibration, so much of rattling of the mind. My simple advice to them, 30 minutes. I ask them, what time you get up? Sir, 6 o'clock. Can you get up at 5:30? Can you give 30 minutes for you, not for the rest of the world? They say, yes, sir. 30 minutes, you get up tomorrow onwards, get up 30 minutes early. Just sit, close your eyes and sit for 6 months. They said, sir, what should I do? I said, don't ask me, come after 6 months. None of them came after 6 months. But many of them wrote to me, sir, we figured out what to do. You put us on a certain path. These pranayama and asana, these meditations are so wonderful methodologies actually. Pratyahara, secondary input is regulated. Mind is all completely pacified. And then, of course, Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi. So these are some of beautiful ideas that are available. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually share with you what we actually did with this idea with a group of executives in a company. And I will show you what happened. It's not about theory. It's about when you try all these, will it make a difference? Can you measure it? Can you assess what happened and so on? So we did it. One of my PhD students did with me this several years back. I thought I will share some of those with you. So we did a study. Does yoga way of life make any difference, particularly to burnout? Because I'm a professor of management, let's sort of study a situation in which managers are sort of having this job stress and burnout and so on. So we went to Grasim Industries Limited. As you know, it's a flagship company of Aditya Birla Group. And out of which one of the unit, of course, this is 12 years back. And I'm just reporting as it was done rather than telling today's revenue. 141 billion Indian rupee with a profit of 20 billion for the year 2007. So we did a controlled experiment at Birla Cellulose in Gujarat, one of the units where we actually did this study. What we wanted to know was, can we introduce yoga to the managers and find out what happened? What did they feel? And we wanted to measure it in a very scientific way. So we set up the experiment. We had some, sort of, they were kind enough to give that permission to do the study and so on. So there are about 1,200 employees, but we were interested in the managerial category because we thought it's a little easier for us to start the study from there. I think there must be more than about 200 of them. But 42 of them, it was all voluntary. If none of them were interested, we would have walked out of the company. We were not interested in any other thing. So 42 of them were ready. We explained to them, it means a certain commitment and we may put you into yoga or something else, but you will be part of the study. So we explained all of them. 42 of them were ready. So we divided them into 2 each, 21, right? So group 1 is called yoga group. What did we do? I will talk about what did we do a little later. And group 2 was called physical exercises group. Because we wanted a control group and an experimental group so that we can sort of understand Does it make any sense? Does it make any difference? And so on and so forth. So the average total work experience of the sample group was 16 years. Fairly senior people. They have seen, both pani pia. You can use the word like that. They have seen enough in their life. So therefore, that's a good sort of a mix that we could really lay our hands on. So what did we do? With the yoga group, we spent 30 hours of yoga practice. Asanas, pranayama, some kriyas. So 75 minutes every day they will have to come. These are all explained and they were all committed. So from a lot of people, we filtered very serious people who were ready. And then 25 hours of theory lectures on various aspects of yoga. What is the basis? What is it trying to address? Why our ancestors thought about it? What are some of them? All that theory and practice. So this happened over, I think, 6 weeks. We were able to put them into the regimen, and then they sort of got into it. And slowly we saw them getting into it, and then getting the hang of yoga and so on. Then we had a physical exercise group. And what did we do? We did a very similar thing, where if they were doing yoga practice here they were doing equal number of hours of physical workout, spot jogging, bending, body rotation, hand and leg movements, etc., etc. All that we did. We also gave them lectures on success factors in life based on the modern thought and not on yoga. And we said how you can be successful, all kinds of things. So both the groups had theory and practice, but the physical exercise group is based on the modern ideas, and the yoga group is based on yoga. And then we have a very nice instrument called MBI, Mashla Burnout Inventory. It's a very reputed study. So we used it. Of course, we adopted it. We have to make a certain modifications of that. We tested it and so on. So we measured the job burnout. That's a good instrument for measuring the level of job burnout. So therefore, we used it and then measured, and then started statistically analyzing what is happening and so on. So 1,120 employees, 30 managers in the control group, 30 managers in the experimental group. Actually, we dropped 9 of them because they were not regular. So finally, it became 21. Although we started with 30, 9 each on both sides. We just because their attendance are as a professor, 75% attendance. Below that, no. We said you don't qualify for this kind of an experimentation because they would not have been adequately sort of done. And then we did a pre-study. Before we started, we measured them. On day 0, for example, we took the MBA instrument and then administered and collected. Then after 6 weeks, we again measured the instrument. So we did a pairwise testing between the two. So September 17th and October 24th, about 5 weeks, 6 weeks is the sort of duration. So this is what we did. So very quickly, I'll show you the results rather than getting into the details of this thing. So what you see here is what happened between before and after. So you have two data there. First data is for the yoga group, and the mean that you see is the difference between pre minus post. Pre minus post is positive, which means pre was higher, post was less. Only then it will be positive. So which means the yoga group burnout actually came down by that MBA metrics, and it is statistically significant also. For the physical exercises group, it went to ulta. What happened was it became negative, which means the stress actually increased from the time we started. By the time we ended, we found actually the stress level went up. That's why it became negative. It's also statistically significant, but it is negative. This is the first one result I want to show. Second result that I want to show you is we also said, let's take all the yoga group and the non-yoga group and find out what is the difference on day 1 before they started. Then we said, let's see their difference on day after the intervention. Earlier what we did was for a group, we find out what is the difference between beginning and end. Here we said, what is the difference between yoga group and the non-yoga group? So what we find here is interesting. The first measure says it is 0.614. and it's statistically not at all significant. That's what all these statistical measures say, which means they were all similar when we started the exercise from the perspective of this job burnout. But after the thing was over, what you find is it is very significant. 0.000 is what you see. It is statistically very significant, which means the two groups are two different groups now. That's what it is actually showing here. Like that, there are a few studies. I just wanted to show you only these two results that we have. So point I'm saying is yoga group showed significant reduction in job burnout, whereas physical exercise group, the job burnout went up. And both the groups looked similar before we started, but they were very different after the group when we entered the exercise and so on. One way we understood why the physical exercises group had more stress was this became a burden for them. After work, and then you ask them to do some more workout, I mean, there's no meaning. They are not able to connect to what is happening, to how it makes a difference to them in a more convincing way than the yoga. Perhaps that's one reason. There are a few others also which we saw. I thought I just wanted to quickly show you this, and all that I want to tell you is yoga is such a wonderful mechanism. It is an operations manual for a beautiful apparatus God has created for every one of us called mind. And it is high time we pick the operations manual, start reading it, and then adjust our apparatus working in a little way. We are only going to gain. I want to end with this beautiful quote from Manusmriti. Manusmriti 2,755 shlokas. There are a few shlokas which people have taken and created so much ruckus out of it. And thus, those number of shlokas run up to about 40, 50. I've read the whole Manusmriti. The remaining 2,000 shlokas are wonderful shlokas. Phenomenal amount of insights. Look at this shloka. Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. Bandhaya vishayasam muktye nirvishayam smritam. Manu says, catch hold of your mind. If you can catch hold of your mind, you'll be on the top of the world. I want to leave this message and leave it here, my dear friends. I would stop here, and I'll be happy if there is a little bit of a sharing of thoughts that can happen. I hand over the floor back to Professor Tiwari. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mahadevan. Thank you very much. What a wonderful, wonderful journey you have taken us. And as you ended your talk with the Manusmriti, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoh, both for your trapping yourself in trouble and also untrapping yourself. It is the mind that works. And as you began by saying, and the Vaishnava also mentioned that yoga is not only a physical and external exercise. And I can tell you lots of comments and questions that are coming, and thank you very much for accepting some of them, are concerned particularly with this kind of bandha, with this kind of what you call stress that has that this COVID-19 has caused. And let me amalgamate some of them and put to you in one question form that, yes, as you said, this is such a topical lecture that people are quite stressed, not necessarily maybe because of work, but the present conditions and future. And as both of you said, that it is an internal assessment of the person that the yoga does and how you do it. Now, as you mentioned, the Bhagavad Gita, more than 3/4 of it is about yoga. And whether you pick up Yoga Sutra or the Bhashya or many other commentaries on it, when you apply it in the, say, modern management and business environment where there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of competition. Yes, you said that you can sit down and meditate and think about it and perhaps look at the tip of your nose, as the Bhagavad Gita says, don't go beyond that. But you also have to look for solutions. Now, those solutions, how would you get those solutions from the Bhagavad Gita? One is to keep peace in mind and perhaps body in good shape. But how do you plan out in a pragmatic manner today?
Professor Tiwari, you touched a very important question which I have been researching for the last 15 years. First of all, Bhagavad Gita has plenty of workable ideas, not fancy thinking.
SOP.
Yeah, plenty of workable ideas that if people use, they can become great managers. In fact, I have a 33-hour elective, 300 students from IA in Bangalore. I just put a lid to it because how many sections I can keep on teaching. So I just stopped at some point. It has so much of value. I just quote one shloka in chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita. Just to tell you, there are so many of them. I will take one shloka from chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita. He says, Devan bhavayata anena, te deva bhavayantuvaha, parasparam bhavayantaha, shreyaha param avapsyata. There is this beautiful concept called parasparam bhavayantaha, shreyaha param avapsyata. A person who does not understand paraspara bhava. This world is world of mutual dependence. Nobody can be a leader worth the salt if they don't honor and understand the principle of mutual dependence. I'll argue it in 4 ways. The first level of mutual dependence is between boss and subordinates. If the boss thinks he has all the power, he can throw his weight. I can tell you the subordinates will see the joy of the boss failing. They will work for it. This is what I have learned and I have seen in both my organization and my consulting. Second, the civil society and the government has mutual dependence. In the last 15 years, we have seen what has happened. There's a critical mutual dependence. You can legislators cannot, elected representatives cannot think they can do anything that they want to do.
Yes,
Nature and human beings have a very critical mutual dependence. There's one place called Kedarnath, and nature required about 4.5 hours to wind the clock by 150 years. This is what nature is telling us. And COVID is another example. Nature says, I'll fix it if you overstep your brief. So mutual dependence, I'm just giving one management concept, mutual dependence. If people don't honor mutual dependence, in my opinion, they can never be a leader. Finished. That's the end of the story. So like that, there are 100 such shlokas out of 700.
Yes,
which I used
it is a great leadership textbook. That's right.
So like that, there are many of them.
Yeah, I mean, there are several comments, and I'll just one brief question, just for you to tickle you to elaborate how you began with a beautiful picture and image of which is normally taken as a, Krishna simply driving that chariot and Arjuna is sitting, and this is of course a beautiful scene. And what you described about the limbs of the chariot and how it needs to be pulled, these aspects, as you explained in the yoga, are so beautifully described both in the Bhagavad Gita and of course in the Yoga Sutra and Patanjali's Bhashya. Could you elaborate on that Shakti that you're talking about, which the horses need to bring in to carry and to push or to drag that chariot, which might otherwise be unstable, not moving?
Yeah. So, see, there is this hierarchy in our system. There is this sort of hierarchy. The lowest in the hierarchy is the body.
Which is why I asked this question.
So the body is inert. Although today we seem to be spending a lot of time in keeping this inert nonsense in its good shape, I think we should do it up to a point, but it looks like we are overdoing it. I'm reminded of a beautiful story in Chandogya Upanishad, where there is a conversation between Indra and, they go to Prajapati. So anyway,
right.
let it remain that. So body is the lowest in the hierarchy. After body, it is actually senses. Now, senses are actually controlled by the mind. Senses have no freedom. We may think senses have freedom. Senses are actually very little freedom. It is the mind which has the freedom. The mind is a super indriya. You know why mind is a super indriya? Because when we are dreaming, when we are sleeping and having a beautiful dream, we use all the 10 indriyas, karmendriyas and jnanendriyas through the mind. I run, I catch a bus, I hit a sixer, and Kapil Dev bowls a ball, or some Virat Kohli hits a shot, and I catch it, and so on. Everything I do here. So I use karmendriyas, jnanendriyas. I go to Chicago, I do this, I do that, everything. So the mind is a super indriya. So in terms of hierarchy, even the karmendriya, jnanendriya is irrelevant. It is the mind. Now the question is there any boss for the mind? Now the boss for the mind is actually the buddhi. Now, this all looks very theoretical because we are in the domain of thinking. We are not in the domain of practice. All these will be evident only when we practice. So now the brain has to overpower the mind. If the brain overpowers the mind, then what would happen is the quality of decisions dramatically change. And that's the training which is given through some of the prayogas, some of the kriyas and the meditation and all that actually restores the balance from the mind into the brain. So into the buddhi. I will not use about brain. Brain is all pathological devices. Buddhi, yeah, that's right. Buddhi is actually an entity actually.
Thank you so much. One can go, since you mentioned the boss, let me ask my boss if he has a few comments to make before I ask my colleague, Dr. Shachi Yadav, to thank you for joining us, my Vice Chancellor. So you need to unmute yourself, sir.
Right.
Yeah, now it's okay. It's okay.
Right, Professor Mahadevan.
Yes.
Just listening to you had an effect of calming our minds.
Very much, I agree with you.
Disposition on the useful benefits of yoga. But let me also add that whenever we arrange webinars of this nature, let us say lessons from Bhagavad Gita or lessons from Ramayana or yoga for de-stressing yourself, sometimes we have this misconception that within this 1 hour, we will get some capsules of information which I can swallow and then I'll become a better person. I think that's a misnomer. This webinar is simply providing you a path, showing you a path on which you have to traverse and you have to experience, you have to practice in order to become a better person. So that is the idea of arranging this webinar. And we are immensely grateful to Professor Mahadevan for his wonderful
discourse today. And on that note, sir, Dr. Shachi Yadav and Dr. Brajesh Kumar Tiwari organized it. Let me request one of them, Dr. Shachi Yadav, to give a vote of thanks. And I personally thank Professor Mahadevan once again for gracing this webinar. Thank you, sir. Shachi.
Thank you, sir. What an enlightening and engaging presentation. Thank you very much for it. Very good evening, and to our most valuable and honorable presenter, Professor Mahadevan, and everyone on this platform. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks and acknowledge the contribution of all of those who worked really hard to make this webinar happen. I, Shachi Yadav, on behalf of Atal Bihari Vajpayee School of Management and Entrepreneurship, JNU, extend a hearty vote of thanks to our presenter, Professor B. Mahadevan again. Today we had the opportunity to hear from you, sir. Your thoughts have enlightened our minds and have shown us a new path, and we have to walk this path, as Professor Jagadish Kumar said. You have triggered our thought process now to use the ancient Indian wisdom to handle and address our everyday concerns. Buddhi is the Sarathi and yoga is a way of life are our takeaways. I'm immensely thankful to our Honorable Vice Chancellor for his continuous guidance and support and keeping up with teaching and learning activities during these difficult COVID times. Thank you very much, sir. And I profusely thank our Dean, Professor Hiraman Tiwari, to float this idea. This is his brainchild, and I should say, sadhu idea, and giving us this opportunity to be a part of it. I need to mention my deepest sense of appreciation to Professor Saurabh Sharma, who has extended all his support in making this webinar a reality. Now, he has given us an immense technical arrangement and coordination. I would also like to thank my colleague, Professor Brajesh Kumar Tiwari, for coordinating this with me. And last but not the least, a big thank you to each one of the contributors and people who are here on this platform to make it a success. Thank you.
I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you. It's wonderful to see so many of you, and I should thank JNU for this opportunity. And these are opportunities for me to self-reflect. I'm very grateful to you for this opportunity. Thank you, and I wish you very best for everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.